This lesson is Karma is a what? Here are your learning objectives for this lesson. In the second pada, the chapter that is about practice, Patanjali states that when pain that should be avoided is not active, move toward the true self. In the last lesson, we looked at the different facets of avoidable pain, the kleshas. And in the sutras, after he explains that, he says, when it's not happening, when you're not actually feeling the pain, when you're not actually doing it, use that time to move closer to the true self, to start to shift the identity from your experience to your true self. And states in the next sutra that when pain that should be avoided is actively happening, reflect upon it, meditate upon it. So look at it, pay attention to it. These are two very useful sutras to the practitioner. So in the first one, when you're not feeling pain, practice. Do your practice. Remember from the previous lesson that practice is stabilizing the mind so that we can start to get a glimpse of the true self, so that we can start to shift identity away from the ego construct, which is an identity that is based on avidya, ignorance of the true self. And those kleshas, the avoidable forms of pain, all arise from avidya. So he's saying when it's not happening, move closer to the true self, further from the ignorance that is the field of origin for all of the kleshas. And when it is happening, look at it. This is a practice that's very, very useful to the human being, and it's part of yoga practice, is when you're experiencing suffering and pain, really examine it. Examine the source of it. And if you get good at doing that, and it takes quite a while to get good at doing that if you're unfamiliar with it. I was not familiar with this at all when I started my practice, and I was not a very happy person. And it was through being taught to look at the source of my suffering that I started to have a life that had less suffering in it. So look at why what you're experiencing is happening. And ultimately, what it all comes down to, and it often we have to remove layer after layer after layer in this quest to discover the source of our suffering, is that we are identifying with the ego construct in some way or another. So let's look at that, some terms that help us identify thought patterns. And so first, the word karma. The word karma, here you have a person playing guitar saying that if you tip him, you'll get good karma. Well, I can tell you that trying to buy good karma is probably a waste of money. Karma is not about what you give to a guitar player on the street. Karma is about actions and how actions have results. It's not a system of reward and punishment. It's simply a statement that the action you take will result in something, whether it's beneficial, harmful, or neutral. This is Newton's third law of motion in Latin, and I have translated it for you. This is it in English, and what is most relevant to us here is this very beginning of it. For every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. What Patanjali states about karma is that the accumulation of actions rooted in these afflictions, so klesha mula karma. So these afflictions is klesha, mula, rooted in, karma, actions, will be felt or known in the life that you see now and the life that you don't yet see. So the actions that you take that are rooted in the five kleshas, all of which originate with avidya, will have results. They will ripen into lifetime experience. So we will have to deal with the consequences of them. And the consequences, he further states, are joyful or agonizing, depending on whether the cause was virtuous or non-virtuous. But still, virtue or no, there is resultant experience from the kleshas, from action that is taken based on ignorance of the true self. So karma is about repeated patterns of action being deeply embedded in the mind. The pathways that they clear, that they make in the brain, make it easier to keep repeating those patterns, and they will produce a stronger result because they're more deeply embedded. So, for example, if we're constantly stating something about ourselves, something about our ego construct in our mind, for example, I am a loser, perhaps. You're saying over and over. It gets easier and easier to say that because you practice saying it. And then because it gets so deeply embedded through this repetition, the effect of it will be greater. It will have a stronger result. So this is just introducing you to the idea to listen to your thoughts. Listen to your thoughts. What are your repeated patterns of action? The word for repeated pattern of action is samskara. The prefix sam means along with. Kara, it means action. So sam means same, and along with kara, which means action, it refers to the thing that comes with action. Along with activity, there is samskara. That's the residual latent impressions left in the mind. So the samskara are the patterns of thinking that are the result of our actions. You can change your patterns of thinking. The term neuroplasticity is a term that describes the brain's ability to develop new neural pathways by changing behavior, environment, and neural processes. Samskara, which is the pathways in the brain that happen as a result of our actions and of our thoughts, is the same as neuroplasticity. They refer to exactly the same thing. Patanjali further states that to one who sees things as they are, to one with accurate vision of the universe, all of our actions cause troublesome pain because they're always changing. Having painful experience is repulsive and leaves pained impressions. Having pleasant experience bring opposite impressions of wanting it to repeat. So we're not after a life of pleasure, nor a life of pain. It's that we seek to free ourselves from being bound to this binary experience of existence. So we do that by studying the self, by paying attention to what our patterns of actions and our patterns of thinking are. This term for this is swadhyaya. We'll look at this throughout the course. Swadhyaya is to study seriously. So to practice Patanjali's yoga, one pays close attention to the self, to what you do, what do you think, what do you do over and over and over again. And we determine which patterns of behavior cause unnecessary pain. For those, we can trace the behavior back to its source, which is ignorance of the true self. And what is stated further is that we should avoid future troublesome pain. This is a vastly, profoundly important sutra. That through this study of the self and through our mind's patternings and watching it and understanding how our identity can be one that is bound to the temporary, unreliable ego construct, or can be bound to the reliable, constant, infinite true self, we start to see how we cause pain. And Patanjali states, avoid future dukkha, avoid future troublesome pain. Learn to do it. And he states that uniting the visible world with the true self is the cause of the pain that is to be avoided. So simply restating that when we say this experience, the visible world, smriti, the knowledge that can be defined, that can be given words to, when we say that that is the real self, that is the cause of the pain that is to be avoided. So that is your introduction to the concept of action, karma, and how our actions, which include our thoughts, result in future experience, and the concept that is fundamental to Patanjali's practice of watching one's actions, including one's thoughts, and starting to shift them toward one that seeks to identify with the true self.